Hey and welcome, I'm Hammeh, and in this video we're going to be looking into all of the little Overwatch 2 lore nuggets and bits and things that we learnt from the BlizzCon 2021 panel. Now, there were loads of storyboards, there were things directly from the team, a way in which it was presented, and lots of different pieces that we could put together as to what Overwatch's story is going to be shaping up to look like in Overwatch 2, as well as what characters might feature, where we might go, hints as to how the story might go, and a lot more. So let's get stuck in. Timecodes in the description below if you want to skip, and if you enjoy this video, please do throw a like, subscribe, share it places as well. It really does help me out. Okay, let's get stuck in. A bit about what is going to be told in terms of Overwatch 2's story, how it's going to be told and who it's going to be told by, and then also a bunch about what characters we might expect to see and some of the scenarios and actual things that might happen in terms of Overwatch 2's story. So some of this is piecing stuff together from what happened at Overwatch 2's panels and reveal at BlizzCon 2019, as well as the 40-minute or so behind the scenes panel video that we've already seen. You can see that on the official Play Overwatch channel. Timecodes in the description below if you want to skip around. First things first, what's going to be told? Well, Jeff and the team in the video said that it's really going to expand what Overwatch means to players. Some of the Overwatch roster got back together, of course, in 0 hour, and there is, according to Jeff, a second huge Omnic uprising. We've known this to be happening already. We're going to apparently learn who's behind it, why it's happening, and why there is such a global spread, and how and to what extent that is happening. Now, as a quick point of detail here before we get into the nitty-gritty, it was interesting to see that the story and franchise development group at Blizzard were introduced as being the people behind the Overwatch 2 story, and many different people were shown. Now, this is as opposed to in the past where maybe one or two people, like Michael Chu, for example, were put forward as spokespeople and therefore by the community, myself included, whether it was perhaps their mandate or their responsibility or not, were seen as being responsible for kind of all of Overwatch's lore and story, concentrated into a couple of people. Here, Blizzard have definitely put forward the team, and this team was always here. For example, Christy Golden, who wrote the Symmetra short story. She works as part of the story and franchise development group, as far as I'm aware, and has worked on Warcraft and more. All of the Overwatch comics, when Overwatch was first announced, these were written by a whole bunch of different people who work in the story and franchise development group. So stories at Blizzard and stories on Overwatch in particular have always been worked on by a wider group of people than we see, including the cinematics team. We got told that there are cinematic intros and outros being worked on for every story mission, and lots of footage and storyboards were shown of them here. All available heroes are getting dialogue for given missions, which is great too. There are NPCs and new characters, and of course multiple hero choices. So when Overwatch 2's story is being developed and brought together, Blizzard are definitely wanting us to know that it's a lot of different people working on it, so that it's a big team, there's more that they can do, they will do more, but also at the same time that maybe we're not singling out individual people as being responsible for what we do and don't like. Next up, more how the story is going to be told. Now, Blizzard, as we've seen for Overwatch 2, are going to be using existing levels to a point, it seems, for not only the story missions, but also the hero missions, but also they're going to be making new ones as well. And indeed, we were introduced to 3 new levels, 3 new maps, one of which we'd seen sort of teasers of at BlizzCon 2019 in terms of India was confirmed, and we also got introduced to Rome and New York. Now, any level that's got an association with a hero can be used already to pick up or for some story around that hero. Jeff Chamberlain also mentioned in the behind the scenes panel that there could potentially be a darker tone to some of Overwatch 2's story. We saw this shot, which I thought was very interesting, of the Toronto subway, as we presume or know it to be, with what seemed to be a lot of Omnics that have died or expired, but we can't actually tell in some of this lighting. Jeff Chamberlain asked the question, how dark can the world of Overwatch go? The characters will have to deal with things they haven't dealt with before, or not on this scale. It's going to look at where the various heroes and characters are in their lives. Given that Overwatch is disbanded, heroes are needed, these people are answering the call, as it were, but they're not allowed to be doing it as Overwatch as an organisation in an official capacity. They're effectively working as vigilantes, and how this is going to affect them. So some interesting routes that the Overwatch story could take here. I'm very much looking forward to seeing particularly what maybe a slightly darker Overwatch story and tone could look like, and who knows whether or not that will affect any of the cast that we hold dear. Blizzard have said in the past, by the way, that they could kill off characters in the story if it made sense, but of course they could still continue playing on in the game, as it were. So wow, that would be a big thing if that happened in Overwatch 2, but at the very least I think there's going to be some more dark story in Overwatch 2, or darker than we've seen to this point so far, so I'm going to be very interested to see how that manifests. Of course, remember the age rating of Overwatch is T for teen. We are probably not going to get a 15 or 18 rated or anything like that Overwatch story, but something a bit darker, very, very interesting. Okay, so on to what characters we will see feature up front and centre in the story. Well, nothing's been said about this directly. Indeed, the comment that was made in the video that we saw about all available heroes getting dialogue for given missions, I think we should assume that it's going to focus around a certain subsection of the cast for the story missions. Imagine trying to fit every single Overwatch hero with dialogue and story into Overwatch 2. That would be a huge titanic effort for one game. So we're not going to see every hero in the roster with dialogue and their own story in the main story campaign for sure, I think. But we do have an idea of who might be centre stage from the behind the scenes video. There is a lot of storyboard art in here, a load of it. Now remember, of course, buyer beware, we can't take all art in these kind of videos as being gospel. If you go back to 2015, 2016 videos on this channel and many others, remember the good old days when we speculated about the original Overwatch concept art, and then in the future we were told a lot of it was old, some of it was outdated, some of it, like the classic medals scene, was in actual fact needing a little bit of tweaking, as well as the Anna Armari photograph that we saw in Anna's origin story in terms of ages and dates. So some of the stuff that we're being shown is absolutely not going to be 100% reflective of what is in Overwatch 2. But for fun's sake, let's go through it and see, I think, some of the things that we can actually learn. So for starters, what characters could we see show up? Well, we have already seen, for example, the events of Zero Hour. We have seen Winston, we have seen Mercy, we have seen May, we have seen Tracer, we've also seen Reinhardt and Brigitte, as well as Echo, as well as Genji, all coming together. And through a combination of not only the storyboard art, but also some of the in-game cut sequences and pieces that we've seen animated, and also actually the new levels, we can actually put together a bit as to what other characters we're going to see and how they'll fit into the story a little bit. Since the events of Reunion, we do of course have McCree, and he is shown in a bunch of the cut sequences and the storyboards. We also saw in the Overwatch 2 2019 BlizzCon reveal that we could be going to Route 66. That was featured on the map. So McCree, of course, is going to feature. We do see Zarya as being played in a couple of the levels, and we also see her in some of the storyboard art here. So if that storyboard art translates to the actual game, then maybe Zarya is getting picked up on the way. Now, Diva, we've seen Busan as the Overwatch 2 original reveal trailer showed that map. We saw Busan as being one of the levels, as it were. We do actually see her mech, if we look at the storyboard, in a few background scenes. I actually really like this one, where the whole Overwatch 2 crew, as it were, or the active Overwatch unit, is charging towards a big threat in the background. Now, we saw, as I said, Busan as being a mentioned level. In Diva's bio, since the game release, there's always been a talk of a kaiju-style Omnic threatening the place. Of course, in Shooting Star, we saw a manifestation of a small bit as to what that threat could be and why Mecha is defending against little Omnic incursions as well as bigger ones. And people have long said, wouldn't it be cool if in Overwatch 2 or if in a story mode for Overwatch you could fight that giant kaiju-style Omnic as Mecha. Now, I can only imagine how big a challenge that is to make, like a level. Like, imagine that as a boss battle, or as a final boss battle, or as PvE. People have fancied that for ages. So this is speculation. Let's not get our hopes up, because I can imagine that being a big technical challenge, but wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? But at the very least, I can see us picking up Diva in some way or another. Farah is an interesting one. We see her in several bits of concept art. There's also a mysterious Omnic character, by the way, that we see here when the ship is kind of dropping its gangplank and everyone is disembarking. Sojourn, I just mentioned, obviously, given that we're going to Toronto, we're going to probably, I think, be meeting with Sojourn there. And I'll actually go over the maps that we know and how people could tie in very shortly, but Sojourn, of course, up front and centre. We're going to Gothenburg. Torbjorn is mentioned, and we see a bit of Torbjorn in terms of Brigitte and similar in footage, but more on that in a sec, as well as Bastion too. And in some of the other art, actually, we see a couple of background characters. Now, whether these are just rough models or rough drawings for heroes that are yet to be included, or whether they're NPCs or other characters, we don't know. But there is certainly space for more heroes too in the story. Let's not forget that. Okay, so with the levels and the new maps that we have, how could Overwatch 2's story come together and what could happen around these, as well as the various storyboards and things that we have seen? Well, it's probably likely that there's going to be something in Paris, whether it's the events of 0 Hour or afterwards, and I would imagine that given that 0 Hour, the cinematic, has already happened, from the beginning of the game we may well have access to perhaps Reinhardt, Brigitte, Mercy, Genji, Echo, as well as Tracer and Winston and Mei, that initial 0 Hour roster, as it were. Now, at some point we're going to head to Brazil. I played Brazil at BlizzCon 2019. That was a pretty polished, pretty together piece of mission. It was really, really good. And presumably we'll interact around Lucio there and the null sector invasion that's going on. Now, we're going to run into McCree at some point. Could that be Route 66? What's going on there? Let's not forget, of course, that this year there's an Overwatch, the second novel is out, which is going to be dealing with Ash's story, but also a bit of McCree and backstory and things as well. So could we pop to Route 66 perhaps to pick up McCree, or would we go there with him? I've already mentioned Busan and Diva. Maybe that could be later on. Ilios was also on the original map. It'll be interesting to see if we're going there for any particular reason. And of course, then the new maps and levels. So there is definitely a story around Toronto. Now, we've got told in the behind the scenes panel that Null Sector is occupying it. So I presume we're going to meet and pick up Sojourn around there. We actually see ourselves in the Toronto subway with a few different characters in in-game footage, saving survivors, and that shot of the attack presumably killing a lot of Omnics, perhaps humans as well. So it'll be interesting to see Toronto being a big part of Sojourn's story, and maybe where we pick her up to add her to the Overwatch 2 crew. Next up, Gothenburg. Well, we've seen some interesting shots already of Torbjorn's workshop that was shown. That's going to be a big part of the level. But also, we've got a kind of Brigitte homecoming. We see some animated shots of her looking a bit nervous talking to Reinhardt. We also see her with a cup of coffee or similar concepted, whether this happens or not, of her talking with Torbjorn. And in a cinematic moment, we also see Bastion in the corner, Reinhardt charging up to him, and Torb and Bastion together, as well as Reinhardt charging up to Bastion and Bastion getting nervous and turning into sentry mode. So probably an interaction and a Gothenburg story around Brigitte coming home and meeting up with Torb. Maybe Torb joins the roster at that point. And next up, from the maps and levels that were announced actually at BlizzCon 2019, Monte Carlo. Now remember, of course, in the events of Doomfist's comic, we saw Doomfist heading, after he'd been broken out of jail, over to Monaco to go and see Maximilian, and of course Maximilian featuring up front and centre in Storm Rising, actually giving away Doomfist when Overwatch caught up with him at the events of Storm Rising. And whether Doomfist actually knows that Max gave him away or not is an interesting one that I don't think has actually been addressed in the lore thus far. However, the initial Overwatch 2 intro trailer saw us with Doomfist in Monte Carlo, and Monte Carlo with the casino that we saw Max in the comic and similar. It's his base of operations. Should be a really, really interesting level for some Talon related intrigue. Next up, India, and maybe this is Suravasa, the setting of the Shrine of the Symmetra Stone by Stone short story. We've already seen in the Overwatch 2 initial reveal that Genji and Zenyatta are meeting up, and in the Overwatch 2 panel we saw a whole bunch of footage of Genji defending what I presume is Zenyatta from Sombra and Widowmaker, a Talon attack. We then see the tech of Widow being scripted to be jumping away, and it looks like we're escorting Zenyatta out or defending the shrine from Talon in general. We see what is probably, I think, the statue of Aurora that Symmetra repaired, and the Overwatch team in the panel actually said that this is one of the biggest maps. It's absolutely huge. It looks really, really beautiful. I can't wait to get stuck into India. Last but by no means least, we have two very, very cool levels in Rome and New York. Now, let's not forget that Overwatch 2 is going to be having more heroes than just Sojourn being added when it launches. So the real question is, what and why are we going to Rome and New York for? It seems very, very odd to me that they would add new maps and then not include them in some way or another in the story, right? Like playing the story on new maps, to me, feels like a very, very natural move. And we already have story elements linked around the other ones. So why would we go to New York, and what kind of hero could show up there? It does look as though from some of these storyboards, and indeed then the animation afterwards, that the dropship is going to be shot down and McCree is going to be flying backwards and forwards as Overwatch try and come into New York. So there's some real problems going on in New York by the looks of things. And what of Rome? Well, Rome looks absolutely beautiful as well. I can't wait to discover why we're going around there, if indeed it's in the story too. And let's not forget, on top of the new maps, that there are actually going to be new different routes on existing maps, both for Overwatch 2's hero missions, the replayable PvE, and maybe these will feature in the story as well. Jeff and the team showed a great example of King's Row, having a whole new area behind a gate that we've never been to before. So maybe we could be heading back to King's Row as part of the story, but if we are, we're going to be going new different directions. The payload can be going different ways too. How else will the story be told? Well, in the panel it was also mentioned that a new branching dialogue system is going to be introduced. So, say for example, if you have Genji and Mercy, which was the given example together in the second mission, they might talk about their past and their experiences. Now, I think this is going to be a version of the system that we've seen in Uprising, Retribution, Storm Rising, and for those of you fans of Junkenstein's Revenge, the alternative universe of that, where all of the heroes and villains talk to each other in different ways, depending on how you play, depending on how many times you play through, and depending on the difficulties in which you play. So there are going to be a whole heap of interactions and voice lines for additional lore and story on top of the main story, the main plot, all of the intro and outro cinematics and things that are being worked on. I would guess, perhaps, just off the top of things, that Blizzard will somehow make it harder to pair these up outside of the game. There has been a file and data investigation community around Blizzard games for many, many years, and also around Overwatch. Those people working because they find it interesting and because they want to help the community for free to help us explore the game files in the past. So if Blizzard do make it harder to pair these and match these up in any way, shape or form, and I'd imagine they will, then I will absolutely go in game and try and hunt them all down as best as I can for you regardless. So you'll find these on the channel, whether or not it's easy to get them, and as always I will talk about them from a story perspective because I know that's what you folks have always enjoyed. As part of the channel's content that I've always made, I know it's not all of the stuff that I've made, but voice lines and interactions will very much be here for Overwatch 2 in future, and maybe some other games too. So there we have it. Now, I just want to quickly step back for a quick summary. In 2016, after Overwatch had launched, loads of people were asking in interviews with Jeff, with Michael Chu, and the Overwatch team, could Overwatch have a story mode? Now, to be fair to the Overwatch team, ever since then, they've always been consistent in interviews saying, if we're going to do story mode, it's going to be a new game. And that's what they've decided to do. The decision has been made for Overwatch 2, it's been developed, it's been worked on, it's been announced, and we've had more news on it this year. Now, I will, in the next day or two after this video, sum up my thoughts from BlizzCon in a little talkie to camera type piece as to where Overwatch 2 might go and where Overwatch will be in the time being as to whether I feel about that. But the story, Overwatch 2, to me, is genuinely looking really great. I'm genuinely excited for it, and Blizzard have said that they're going to be talking a bit more often about it this year. Last year, after BlizzCon 2019, they said they were going to be going quiet for pretty much a year. This year, they've said they're going to be talking more about it. So looking forward to hearing more news on Overwatch 2 and all of the lore and story and things that might happen in the months and hopefully not too long, but certainly the months ahead. So there we go, a lot of interesting details on the characters that we might see, turns that the Overwatch 2 story might take, where we're going to be going, and a lot more lore for a lot more different characters. Very interesting indeed. If you like this video, please do throw a like, subscribe, let me know what you're thinking about Overwatch 2 story, anything to do with the BlizzConline announcements and more. And if you like Overwatch's story, do check out all of my videos here in these playlists. I've been covering Overwatch's lore, story, interactions, voice lines, and much, much more, comics, animated shorts, short stories, you name it, for the last 5 years or more of Overwatch. Big thanks to my patrons on Patreon who, although it has been paused since last April, it's probably going to be starting again soon, as well as some new content I'm going to be making around Overwatch and the lore and story of other Blizzard games, and indeed more video games and more besides. So if you'd like to see how you could help the channel from just £1, $1, a coin to a witch, or €1 a month, check out patreon.com/Hammeh. Cheers for tuning in. I've been Hammeh. Channel update to come in the next couple of videos, as well as more Overwatch videos this week and beyond. Take it easy.